Welcome to this webinar by BA Sphere. We hope you enjoy it. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share.
Thank you everyone for joining us for today. While preparing for this session, somewhere in my mind, I'm thinking this might be the shortest ever BA Sphere session we've ever had. Maybe, maybe not. Just in case you can't hear me at any point, I've been told a number of times my voice can be very, very low. Just give me a stop. Nobody's in my room. I'm not hiding from anyone. Just let me know that my voice is low and I'll try to tune up the volume. Today, I'm going to talk about requirements. It's essentially going to be a refresher for many of us on this call. It's really important as BAs to keep refreshing what we know. Maybe there might be something new you'll pick, but I suppose that based on the number of persons I know on this call, it's just going to be like a refresher where we just get to update our knowledge around the all-important topic or requirements. Today, I'm going to look at essentially two things. First is establishing a definition for requirement. And then we'll look at just a few things just to stimulate conversations within this class. Of course, there's no pressure from anyone to make any contribution, but just something to look at in terms of some stuff I put together. Then I'll share my experience working in some of my current roles in a digital environment. How what we do looks slightly different from what I learned theoretically about the art of requirements management. Like say that directly introduce me. I currently work with the NHS Business Service Authority. Prior to that time, I was working with the Scottish government, then the London Borough of London, and way before then in Nigeria, I was with NONEC, an engineering, procurement, and construction company. I was privileged to study at the University of Edinburgh Business School. For those who don't know me, did a postgrad program at the Nigerian University of Technology and Management, and I've been fortunate to do a number of business analysis courses, which are also going to be feeding into the conversations that we'll be having today. Just a little more about those companies I've worked on, majorly digital environments, building systems and processes and structures to support a wide range of like huge financial transactions within the UK context. So going into my topic, requirements. Somewhere in my mind, I have this bias. It's a very big bias that we all know what requirements are. Even before many of us on this call became conscious PAs. And I always like to validate that assumption that, hey, I believe you know what requirements are, even before we begin to look at that definition. And I just want to test that here on this call. For some of you who probably are single, Pringles, with dimples and are very simple, or those of you who are married, I suppose that when you were seeking someone to probably be with, there were some things in your mind that, hey, these are the things I'm looking out for, right? Or maybe you were hunting for a house or you're trying to like get a mortgage for a property. I suppose that there's something that you were also seeking in those houses. Or if you're like me, like trying to probably get a car, there's also something you're probably like looking at. If anybody is happy to unmute themselves or just want to drop in chats, for any of these categories, what were some of the things that you were looking for? Any pressure?
Hi, good morning, Tosin.
Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
I can talk about maybe buying a car.
Yeah.
So some of the things I used to look for, I mean, even to now, nobody judge. I still drive a manual car because I just feel more comfortable in it.
Yeah.
But some of the things I always look out for in a car is the number one for me is always the media in the car, as in from the very beginning, does it have a CD player? I mean, right now does it have a port where you can plug in your phone, where you can perhaps get a GPS, because I don't always trust the GPS in the cars. So I want to be able to plug in my phone to be able to use the GPS. I need to be able to plug in my phone to listen to music while also listening to getting the GPS direction as well. So for me, the number one has always been the media. Once I can get good music from the car, I won't buy it, but it's a definite plus for me. I always like a busy dashboard. I mean, this might not make sense to a lot of people, but I like a busy dashboard. I always say my next car is going to look like a cockpit. I'm always saying it. I don't know what car that is going to be yet, but I always like a busy dashboard where I'm looking for things on the dashboard. I like a beautiful interior. I like big cars, so definitely going for big cars. So these are just some of the things that are like important to me when I'm looking for a car. Obviously, a car that functions with a good engine. But those things are the things that will make my comfort enjoyable while driving the car. So I look for those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine if you and I were to own the car, there'll be a lot of back and forth arguments. Oh, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Helen, for sharing. Anybody want to say something before I just move on with the rest of?
My name is El Haji.
Yes.
For house hunting, for example, my first requirement is you gotta be a 4-bedroom house. So, and you gotta have a basement. So those are the two. If it's not 4, no basement, yes, I'm already looking for the next one. So that's my requirement number 1.
Solid. Thank you for sharing that. So I've shared the document. As we talk about, we don't necessarily need to be BAs to know that. I believe personally, just hearing from some of the things I've heard, I'm sure if we all went around the room, we all have people who have different things to say in terms of what they are looking for. And that's like my first bias or assumption that I believe everybody in the world, we all know what requirements are. And by that, I think we are already playing to the business analysis game. So if these were perhaps some of the things we're looking for in a new house, these are tentatively requirements from you, and we can only say, yes, it's something I want, no, it's not something I want, and all of those like different stuff. So across different range of categories, there are always things that people are looking for in whatever they want to do. Those could be needs, they could be wants, they could be pains they're trying to numb, inefficiencies in their lives they're trying to remove, or they're trying to optimize how things are currently done within their spaces, or problems they are trying to solve for with what they are seeking. Those things, in their very simple, traditional, elemental form, they are what we call requirements. I'll bring up what I've got for something like relationship too, even though there is no textbook in BCED and saying boyfriend, girlfriend, they are part of requirements. But of course, we know anytime we are talking about needs, anytime we are talking about wants, anytime we are talking about things we desire in something or someone from a system or a process, essentially what we are talking about is requirements. If you want somebody of good character and values, somebody who has some sort of like emotional maturity, somebody you can have very good, intelligent conversations with, you can resolve conflicts with, someone you share similar worldview, faith, culture, beliefs, almost like sort of like lifestyle. You're trying to look across a range of things. Essentially, what we are talking about in that context is requirements. And of course, we know that we can't have it all in life. There are always going to be things that are our non-negotiables, which we will see discuss more as we advance this conversation. Then there are things that, I don't mind. And then there are things like, no, if it's not there, then just forget about it. So that to me is requirement, and that fulfills my very first assumption and bias that I think everybody, we all know what requirements are. If we were to put a definition to it, like I always like, get to talk to people, especially people who are trying to transition into business analysis. There's technically not too many things in business analysis that is not something you have done, either in your former life, your former role, or in some of your current engagements. What might be different than just some of the big grammars we put around them? So with respect to requirement definition, which of course, like I said, we all know what requirements are. These are some of the BCS related definitions that you might come across from a big grammar perspective, or a feature that the business user needs the system to be able to like do for them, provide. Somebody is saying here, conditions or capability needed by the user to solve a problem or achieve an objective. We know we are all speaking English. Essentially, this is what I want. This is what I need. That's what we are talking about. We flip that to an IBA lens. Of course, just for somebody wondering what's IBA, there's somehow like two business analysis bodies more like regulating business analysis. One is called like the BCS, which is the British Computing Society. It's more popular here in the UK and maybe some part of like Europe. Then we've got the International Institute for Business Analysis, which also another body that's also regulating business analysis. They have their own textbook called BABOK, the Business Analysis Book of Knowledge. And then for BCS, you will see things more around stocks produced by Deborah Paul and all those sort of like people, or not like the BCS umbrella. Again, they have their own definition for BCS perspective, but just something very, very simple at the core of it, which is a need representation. Whatever we are using to depict a need, that's what we mean by requirement. Of course, you know, like human beings, there are always hierarchy to our needs. We all have needs as human beings. There are things that are very important to us. This is Maslow's hierarchy, which I know many of us on this call are also familiar with. There are needs that we have that are physiological in nature. There are needs that we have that have like safety related, things that have to do with love, self-esteem, and self-actualization. Somebody was asking me one day, to say, if you are just collecting salary, but you are not working, how happy would you be? Like, I think that might be frustrating. And that's because money is not the only thing many people live for. There's a sort of like meaning we also like pursue with our lives. And sometimes when you take that meaning away from our lives, life might become really very boring. And, you know, there's just an important need in your life that will not be met. It's why people like you, for example, join webinars like this, not because you don't necessarily know what we are talking about, but there's always something inside of you that feels like I need to be making good use of my time, of my life. Even though I have all the money, I have all the jobs, but I still need to have that sense of I'm doing something meaningful with my life. So that is with respect to needs with humans. If we put that in parallel with requirements, we also have classifications or schemas for requirements. On IBA lens, you'll see like these broad categories. There are many other things you will also hear, which I'm going to talk about just to like get to like advance this conversation. These are like the core types or schemas for requirements. Every other thing you will see that have requirements attached to their names, I personally believe that they can sit somewhere in these buckets. So you always say about business requirements, which is sometimes like the business goals or needs. And then from that, we can break it down to identify stakeholder requirements out of that. Then if you break the stakeholder requirement down, we find the solution requirements, which we all know our functional requirements, the non-functional requirements, and then we talk about things like your BRs, which are business rules and things around that. And in the course of moving from implementing a solution requirement, trying to implement a solution, between going from that current state so that new future state you want to achieve, there are probably some transition requirements, which are things that need to be put into place for us to be able to journey from implementing this solution to achieving what the business really wants us to do. We flip that to the BCS lens. This is their own schema for requirements. Here they're not calling it a requirement, they're just calling it a business goal, a business objective, what the business is trying to achieve. If you break this down, you have like business requirements in these. And within their own context, business requirements could be a general requirement or a technical requirement. If you split this down again, you are going to further decompose that again into like solution requirements, entailing these two quantities here. So when you implement a solution requirement, essentially you are trying to implement these PRs, and then ultimately that is helping you to implement your BOs. So, like I mentioned, general requirements here, when we say that, generally we mean things along these stratas. We're talking about constraints that like guide the business, talking about the policies. There are things that legal guys are saying. If you work in a number of companies, for example, there are just some ways your system has to behave to avoid like some legal penalties. So all those things around, these are the things we can put out, these are the things we cannot put out. There are generally things called general requirements. If you go to some website, you will see some specific colors that you are seeing coming out to you. That's like branding, and that is also a requirement. Again, the kind of requirement that is a general requirement. Okay, culture, just trying to depict all of this. They're not necessarily what a system should do, but it's just like when you are looking at a system that has been built, you want all of these to also like be visible to you. So these are requirements too, but they are requirements called general requirement from BCS lens. Then we've got the technical requirements. Again, just talking about things like IT, software, internet, interoperability, all of those different things. Again, they are not necessarily describing what a system should do or a system should do it, but are just layers of infrastructure, layers of tech connectivities that should be added to what needs to be done in the organization. Then, of course, the all important functional requirements, which is like bread and butter to almost every one of us on the call. So here, essentially, we are talking about the system's ability to do something, right? And, we use this acronym to identify those, functionalities good. Whether the system is creating stuff for you, or the ability of the system to read anything, to update or delete. And then if you try to split that down a little bit, we are talking about all things like gathering and recording data, blah, 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 blah. Functional requirements, what the system should be able to do. Then we have our NFRs too, just talking about how the system should be for us. And these are like some broad categories that we have with respect to them, whether I'm talking about security, performance, accessibility, talking about, scalability, which I think that things are most of us on the call we're familiar with. But just in case there are people who don't know what these are, so if you're using a system, we're saying that anytime, say I click a search bar, it should return output for me, say in a few seconds. We are literally talking around like performance. We are talking about things like somebody who is visually impaired should be able to use your system. All right, so we are talking about things around accessibility along that line. Could also be talking about access, such that not anyhow kind of person should be able to access our systems, or certain functions within our systems should only be performed by XYZ kind of persons. Say only a super admin should be able to delete a record. Only a super admin should be able to do maybe sign a case so someone is going to work on that. We are talking about access within that context. Talking about reliability, at any point in time, say you are integrating a system with, say, your warehouse. At almost any point in time, we should know per time how many stocks we have. We know that data it is returning to us has to be reliable. So we're talking about all of these non-functional related ones. Something else we also talk about is business rules. Again, I think that business rules should sit under this functional requirement, and we will see some of those things when we look at a few examples. But when we talk about rules, business rules, essentially they are talking about constraints that are imposed on a system, constraints or operational guidance in terms of how a system should behave. So if you're saying that, for example, if you have a gambling complaint or if you have a gambling machine, if you ask for the age of the person, if that person is less than 18 years, the system should not allow them to proceed with that operation, because by law, anybody below the age of 18 should not be able to gamble. All right, that is a constraint we are imposing on that system. So by default, once that person clicks, no, I'm not 18, you should lock them out or prevent them from going forward. That's a business rule. But again, it's also talking about what a system should be able to do. Don't allow this person to progress because of this constraint that has been imposed on it. I remember the first time I went to Toronto, I think it was last year, and I was just trying to buy something. They were charging me like 2 different kind of tax. I'm like, what is going on here? So that tax being added, for example, to my payments could be what we call operational guidance. So again, it's a rule that anytime somebody buys something here, maybe a tax of 5% should be charged on that person, and an additional maybe tax of maybe 2.5 or 5% should be charged by XYZ. In terms of how that calculation is done, the rule that guides that is called operational guidance within the context of business rules. And if you go to some UK, say supermarket, for example, that say anything before 10 a.m. or after 10 p.m., nobody should be able to check out alcohol. So it will mean that every other item can be checked out, but anything alcohol before that 10 a.m. or after that 10 p.m. should not be able to be checked out. That is a constraint we are imposing on that system too. So it's a business rule. But the kind of rule, again, like we said, it's still going to sit under these broad categories we have talked about. It cannot be a different category or a schema of requirements on its own. So if I bring up, say, very, very short book, just to also add context to some of the things we are talking about here. Say we have I thought like this. So just to see this is for somebody who might not be a BA, might not know what some of the things I'll be talking about. So again, we talk about some examples of requirements. Let's say the system shall do this. Anytime you are seeing the system shall, we are just talking about functional requirement, what the system should be able to do for us. The NFR part of this is how the system should behave. All right, the system should respond to us in 3 seconds, should be available almost any time. So imagine I tap my laptop, I should be able to access it almost immediately. And then the business rule is talking about maybe some of the constraints that should be imposed on it. So let's say this is a property management system. Rents should be sent out first day of each month. There should be a grace period of customers, 5% outstanding rent. These are like additional rules that are being imposed on the system. And there are some things that you can look at and say, this is not a requirement. For example, the current spreadsheet is difficult to use. I'm not talking about requirements here. I'm just expressing like something that is not working. It is not a requirement, all right? The old system was purchased in 2016. It is not a requirement. So it matters to know what is a requirement, what is not a requirement. So a problem statement is not a requirement until it is phrased properly for us to understand it as a requirement. I'll continue the conversation. Just continue with the rest of the slides. So, like I mentioned, you hear these are not the only things we hear when we talk about requirement. They are only general, technical, functional requirement. There are other things that have requirement attached to their names, for example, but they are not new categories of requirement. They are just things that are further expressing the kind of the broader categories we have just looked at. For example, I remember I joined a project one time, and I was hearing them writing out API requirements. And I was thinking, is this a new category of requirements? Actually, it is not a new category of requirement. It is just a need, advancing one of these broad categories of requirements, right? It's possible that you join the company and tell you, can you help us put together training requirements? They are not talking about a new category of requirements. They're just talking about a need with respect to training. For this training, we want to have like a hall that can take 20 people. That's a requirement. But you see, that can take 20 people, you can literally make it sit under the stakeholder requirement because it's something that stakeholders need with respect to that training. So just in case you hear training requirement, migration requirement, communication requirement, UI requirement, interface requirements, or you hear somebody talk about UX requirements or security requirements, they are not new types of requirements in themselves. What they are saying at their core is that they are expressing a need for something, and then that need we can then begin to break down. Okay, these are the things they want to satisfy in this particular regard. So again, these are core categories, and then when we then begin to look at specific needs inside of this, we can then begin to talk about some of these ones. I see somebody raising up their hands. If it's a question, you can pop it in the chat, or if it's something that's so urgent, I'm happy to take it now.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if there are a need. So shouldn't they go to the BRD, or is it just different?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So if there are needs, it depends on what kind of context you work, which is something I'm going to talk about towards the very end. If you work in an agile environment and say you have built a system, which I'm going to do a very quick demo towards the end, and they're saying that, hey, in this particular system we are not able to download something we have just uploaded, just to be sure that, say, what I have uploaded is the right thing. I want to be able to view that. If that, for example, is a need, if you work in Agile, the way that works is you take that into your backlog, then your PO does the prioritization, probably alongside you, or they can do it alone. Then if they say this is something we need to work on, then you go ahead to create ticket for it and they take it forward. That's in an Agile environment. If you work in a slightly more waterfall environment where the way they do their stuff is slightly different, again, that might be something that might sit in your BRD at first. I've not worked in much environment in that for, but I'm sure that will first of all be captured somewhere. It will need to like be analyzed and prioritized, and then before we then commit to doing anything around it. Right. Just like I mentioned, you will always see many things have requirements attached to their name: data requirements, reporting requirements, security requirements. They are not necessarily strict things that they are talking about. They're just talking about needs. All right, needs. That is what they are talking about. They say API requirement, for example, which I will come and show you what things that I'm talking about API. Say you click a button and they say this button should go and fetch that information from this system and return it back to you. When they didn't say that requirement, it just means what input parameter do we need? What should we return back to us? In what format? Should it be a PDF? Should it be something on the screen? Should it be a short text? Those things are just, in very simple terms, what they mean by the API requirement. So even if we don't put API requirement in front of them, we just say if I click this button, this information should show, this information should be returned in this format. It should send me an email. That is still talking about it, but we have just put requirement at the back of it to express the specific kind of need we are describing in that place. So just to further advance that, imagine this is your house, okay? You've got like your room, you've got your dining room, you've got, say, your toilet, you've got your living room, you've got your office space. And then you're saying, hey, listen, this is my requirement for my room. And then I call it a room requirement. All right, say the room shall have a bed and a sofa. It should have a plant. It should be color red. So that can be called a room requirement, but it doesn't mean it is a new kind of requirement in itself. It is still a normal requirement we're talking about, but just for the sake of expressing the specific need for the room, that's why I put requirement at the back of it. For the dining room, of course, I know the way I want this to look might be different from this. Oh, I want maybe blah, blah, blah to be there. I want a mirror. I want this and that. I'm expressing need for what this should look like, okay? I might call this my dining room requirement. But of course, I will still know that everything we're talking about is still talking about normal requirement types, whether it's a specific goal I'm trying to achieve, something specific in terms of functionality or anything like that. And I'm saying all of this to say that for some of us who might be new to working in tech, so that when you see this, you don't start shivering. Oh, what are they talking about? Oh, I've never done room requirement before. I've never done API requirements. You just would listen. What do you want? Then they will tell you the need. And that need is just what you write down as the requirement. Remember, requirement is a representation of a need. So just that need. You just need to listen in between what they are saying and just write that down. And it's as simple as that. Let's visualize the screen together just to like talk about all these various jargons I've been speaking about. Okay. Let's assume that this is Amazon, right? We know some things about, say we work in Amazon, that hey, the sellers that we deal with, they want it to be easy for them to find their products, okay? They just want it easy for customers to find their products, right? They have not expressed this way beyond that, all right? We know that customers, generally, we are impatient when we go to Amazon. If something is not clicking as I want it, I'll go to eBay, I'll go to Tim, I'll go to Shane, right? So they know users are impatient after they have done URL, that these guys don't stay more than 10 seconds or 5 seconds on the screen. So that means that whatever they are clicking has to respond to them immediately, okay? Let's also say that the information and governance team are aware that there are hackers consistently trying to scrap card details. Of course, you know that Amazon sometimes retain your card details, and they want to be sure that any card details that are being stored there are safe to use by everyone, okay? Then you know that sometimes when you want to make payments, there is an integration platform that gets to like collect that payment, okay? They want that Amazon platform to be integrated with another payment system, all right? Literally, we're talking about API here, all right? So when I click that pay, you should sync me with this particular payment. Let's also say that at any point in time where a customer wants to buy something, we have to know that item is in stock, right? And in real time, we should be able to say, this is in stock, not in stock. There's only one left, there's only two left. That means that there should be a sync between this front-end system we are interacting with and the warehouse system or whatever system that they have that contains all the stocks that they are dealing with. Everything has to be there in real time, all right? There are also a lot of concerns about data quality. Oh, we want to be sure that people who are buying, for example, we have their accurate names, their accurate address, all of those things, just to avoid not having quality data for the sake of analysis. And then we know that there are users of the system that they have high, maybe seeing impediment, and they should be able to like navigate through the system too, maybe with some use of hearing aids. If we were to look at this, say this screen we are looking at, we can see all the different kinds of requirements essentially like represented here. For example, if I talk about this search, if I click on the search, it should return result for me in a few seconds, right? We already know what kind of requirements we are talking about there. We're talking about that NFR there, right? We're talking about, the overall goal the business is trying to achieve. Just make it seamless for customers to shop. Whatever that seamless means, with something we can track by the comments or, by the reviews that they are dropping back in terms of using. We can also track whether people who are trying to add items to carts are able to like clear them out, or things are just hanging in the carts. Nobody is able to like take things out for themselves. So we can do all of those reporting and then have ideas of that, right? So we're talking about integration, say integrating like with this to show stock availability in real time. If something is available or not available, we should be able to see, right? If we say we order something, the delivery team should receive the item immediately. All right, that is integrating an order, all right, to the delivery system that the public account. That integration has to work in sync immediately. All right, so that's talking about integration requirement. We're talking about things like, say, API requirement, for example, or say you're trying to make a payment and then it takes you to the payment gateway securely. That's talking about the API requirement. If I click on this page, it takes me there. All right, the needs of the user that say, oh, I should be able to create this and add it to my cart. That's talking about the functional requirement. If I click this, it should go to my cart. And in that cart, I should be able to update, delete, all of those things. Those are expressions of functional requirements, right? If we talk about things like interface requirement, this means that everything I'm seeing there from the logo, blah, blah, I can easily see them. Talking about the colors, the color blue, all of this already talking about it as a general requirement, which is something matching their brand colors and all. And the way the entire thing is also worded, talking about communication, so customers can understand what is here without necessarily needing somebody to, can you explain this in English for me? Or if I add an item to my cart and I make a payment, receiving that information immediately based on the preferences I've indicated, whether it should be a text message or an email that should be sent to me. These are talking about those comms requirements. So you will literally see, just by looking at this screen, there are a lot of requirements we are talking about there. But you see that they sit under the broad categories of requirements that we've always been talking about, and it just makes things easier to visualize. Again, just trying to talk about the same thing, but just trying to call out those things I've been talking about some more. You might hear something like validation requirement, for example. So here, say we've talked about that data quality, and then a team has said, hey, we just ran some analysis through our backend, maybe like database. I've gone through my database and I've seen that, hey, all the data we have, people just put j@gmail.com. The emails are wrong. The national IDs are inconsistent. If tomorrow these data management guys that, audit the data quality of companies come, they're going to fine us almost $100 million. We might be in trouble. So what needs to happen is that we need to ensure that the data we are collecting are accurate and correct. So this then becomes a validation that will be introduced into like the forms that we are collecting. And so that validation will stipulate the kind of rules. Say, for example, where I want to collect address, they can say the address can only contain maybe only text and number. The names cannot contain numbers. It cannot contain the actual text. The date of birth, it cannot be a date in the future. It cannot be a date that is too much into the past. Somebody cannot say they are 1,200 years old. Validations have to kick in to ensure that we have the right dates. For the phone number, it has to be in a particular format, right? And these are called validations. So anything that doesn't meet the rules that have been defined here, it is something that has not met the data requirement. So that data requirement just talking about the data we are collecting, what are the kind of rules that we help us say, yes, this is a right data, it's a wrong data. With respect to attachment too, there are also validations that might be introduced that, hey, our system can only accept XML, or our system can only accept PDF. Any other file type, we will not accept that. Okay, so that is also introducing a validation in this particular place. So those things, they fall under both data and validation requirements, and then we'll be able to like say, the implication of that. And then this is talking about UX. Somebody can run through this through accessibility and say that, you know what, people who are blind cannot do this. So it is not meeting with, say, the GDS compliance, for example. GDS is something you hear a lot if you work in government, just talking about government digital services. Anything we build in government has to meet the GDS requirements, both in terms of content, in terms of accessibility, in terms of whatever we are there. Like some of these tiny texts, for example, I don't think they might pass accessibility, but those are things that need to be reflected in this. So you will see different kind of things having requirement appended to the back of them. But like I said, if you're asked to do any of this artwork, just listen in between what they are saying. What do you want? They will describe that to you, and then you can then go and expand on that as your requirements. So then comes the big question: why requirements? I'm sure we must all have seen this picture at one point or another in our lives, where a customer explains something to you that this is what I want, and then how the PM, for example, understood it, and then the analyst that designed it say, oh, okay, I think this is what they are talking about, blah 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 blah, until eventually we deliver this kind of product, which is really very different from what the customer wants. And so, based on a report done by PMI, on which the link is there, and I think we can also check it out by ourselves to read more. 47% of unsuccessful projects already are related to poor requirements management. Just talking about the importance of solid requirements management with respect to building successful projects. This is really very interesting because you have to wonder, where do these requirements come from? It's sometimes the idea that some of us BAs we had, that requirements are waiting for us in the office. Come on, pick me, come on, pick me, come on, pick me, come on, pick me. I'm waiting. Hi, pick me. Or the requirements are lying down on the office floors just for you to go and gather them. Or many times they don't come across like that. But first, where do they come from? They come from stakeholders, and these are the various contexts that might allow stakeholders to be able to be the ones to give us, or we can get those requirements from them. It could be a change the company is trying to make, and that then informs the kind of requirement that needs to be put into place to support the strategic changes. It could be that we are trying to introduce a new business, a new product, or there is a rule by the government. Say, for example, some of us who are from Nigeria, we know CBN can say, hey, tomorrow, any bank that does not have XYZ, blah, 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 is going to be the implication. And so the financial service industry then begin to run to me that. So that business rule is shaping that requirement. So that requirement is coming from this particular business rule. Also, like I mentioned, these things, even though these are like some of the things that instigates the kickstarting of a requirement, ultimately we still need to engage stakeholders as BAs. We are not the source of requirements. We can't manufacture requirements. So it matters for us to know who is a stakeholder. All right, how do I identify one within a project context? So it means a different thought process that undergirds who we might think of as a stakeholder within our project context, whether somebody will benefit from or will be harmed by the project, somebody who has the information, somebody who, as a political views, compliance we need to meet, somebody who can invest financially or who can shape the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. So these are thought processes we need to have as PAs to know, okay, this is a project stakeholder, this is somebody I need to speak to. And in just more fanciful form of it, we have them to be external or to be internal. And so external could be these guys that they are suppliers in terms of, hey, the portal you have, I'm not able to use it very well. Or if we will be able to be a supplier, these and these and these are the system we have that the system should be able to integrate into, right? So that is a supplier shaping the kind of requirements that should influence the system we're trying to build, okay? We could also like be the government to clients, shareholders, just defining or shaping the outcome of the project that you're trying to work on. If you're preparing for BCS, this is a grammar you might need to just memorize. They call their own stakeholder wheel. Essentially, it's just the same thing we talked about types of stakeholder, internal, external. And then this one is just saying these are the broad categories of stakeholders within the BCS context. So techniques to identify these guys. These are among many others are techniques to use. We can review document to identify people that have been mentioned there. You can try to do brainstorming with some of the other guys who are working together to say who are the guys we need to work with in these projects. It could also be by surveys and questionnaires where people tell you you need to be speaking with that department. This person has to be in that meeting you need to do. It could also be a hierarchical nomination where somebody tells you that person needs to be here. We need to be speaking with these, or it could be from SMEs who know all the various people we need to be talking to. So just because requirement can come from stakeholder doesn't mean that the requirements are waiting to be picked on the floor. Just because we know the stakeholder doesn't mean that we already have a requirement. Because many times what you will find is you go and meet somebody and then they really don't even know what the problem is. Because there's something we call tacit and explicit knowledge. People might know something in their head, but might not know how to explain it to you. So sometimes it matters to know that this project I'm going into, I am not going to just pick requirements just easily on the floor like that. Sometimes it can be as easy where people hand you over what they want. Other times you need to do what we call engineering. And so while stakeholders can be a source of requirements, the requirements are not necessarily waiting on the floor to look at that. We have to engineer them. What then do we mean by engineering? What do we mean by requirement engineering? It means we have to apply rigor to get this requirement out. We need to apply a range of techniques to get this thing out of the stakeholders, and we need to artfully bring everything together. And there's a diagram that depicts the whole requirement engineering framework. Okay, you'll see these two diagrams, and one thing that is you can tell here is it's a continuous process, right? It's not linear. It's not like once I get the requirement, we'll go straight into implementation. Sometimes you get the requirement, you elicit that requirement, analyze that requirement. Sometimes you go back to the station. That, hey, Ella, you said XYZ, but could you explain that some more to me? I didn't quite catch that during our last conversation. And then you go back to the station, then tell you again. Then you can take that forward to validation that, hey, here's what I got from what we spoke about last time. Is that what you're really talking about? And say, actually, yes. Actually, no. This is what I mean. Oh, things have changed now. I know I mentioned the least number of persons we need to have that to happen is 2. Now, there's a policy that says it has to be at least only 1 person. So it's an ongoing process. And so you see that anytime we elicit, we quickly document that before we carry on with our analysis. Once we are done with analysis, we update our documentation. We are trying to validate. Validation has been done. We still update our document. And then we talk about management. We still update our document. I want to have somebody a question on this call. Anybody who is happy to unmute themselves and share. I'll be happy to hear from you. Why do you think these arrows are pointing towards documentation in this diagram? There are no wrong answers. Anybody who wants to go? Otherwise, I'm going to call my friend and just call Ella. Ella is my friend. I like to call Ella. Okay. Yeah. So in just very much simple words, it's really not like an hard fixed rule for why that happens. But just first of all, it serves as a repository. Anytime you get any piece of work from anyone, it matters that we quickly document them so that we don't lose them or the meanings don't change in transit. Okay. So if we get a raw requirement, it matters that we quickly put them down. All right. If we analyze something, it matters that we say this is where we are at now, so that everybody can be on the same page. Because you realize that we are adults. A lot of things are happening in our world. We can forget something so quickly. And so to avoid that story of, oh, I told you that the system should be able to allow me to log in only by 2 a.m. Why did you put 2 p.m.? Say, but you said 2 a.m. No, I didn't say 2 a.m. To avoid this kind of drama, we need to quickly document, put things down, and as things are changing, it continues to be a living document that we continue to update. And second is for the sake of traceability. So we need to know who is bringing us this requirement, where did we get it from? And then we can quickly trace it back. Okay, these functionalities we have implemented, this is stakeholder need that is satisfying, or this is a stakeholder need that we have. This is a functionality that is missing that. And of course, we know this Chinese whisper where stakeholder can tell you something, and between them and when we implement, we can be having something extremely just different. So a strategy is saying we want to watch the market. Somebody say, you know what, let's just bring this speaker as they watch and evolve. So requirement can change each time it is interpreted or summarized or handed over. And to preserve it with BA, we need to do this through documentation, validation, and traceability. So again, the reason we have this here at the center is essentially from a traceability and a preservation point of view. So what techniques do we use for this elicitation? We have quite a number of them, and you'll see that we always use a combination of them depending on what piece of work we are trying to do. There are times where stakeholders can tell you directly, say you have a system, which I'm going to talk about towards the later end. They tell you, hey, we are not able to do X, Y, Z on this system. Can you help us, implement that functionality? That is already talking about requirements, and it's not coming from a document analysis. It's just coming directly from users, just telling you what they want. Sometimes you can tell them, you know what, can you do your work in my presence? Just share your screen and try to navigate, and then you can see what they are doing, and then we say, okay, I think it makes sense. Okay, I think it doesn't make sense, and you can restart with your PO, and then with the Scrum team that you are working on, and then they can decide this is something to do or not. If you are joining a project at a discovery phase where the work is just starting from the beginning, the very, very beginning, right? Nobody knows what the system will look like, blah, 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 blah. You have to use a combination of this approach to do that. I'm thinking I might show a prototype in the course of this conversation, but prototype is just which something I can is something I think we also use to model requirement, just to be able to show, hey, is this what you are really, really talking about? And then we can be able to show that to the users of our system. Say, for example, this, is a product. Let's say this is a property management system. A prototype just means that this is not a live system, okay? All right, it's just something that has been built just to show if we build this thing, this is what it's going to look like. And you can just generate this with AI by feeding your requirements to it. I'm going to talk more about this in a session I have later this afternoon with some persons, just in case you have interest in joining that. So this can be a prototype. You have gathered all the requirements, and then you want to show the stakeholders, hey, is this what you say we should build for you? You want to have a dashboard where you can see the amounts being collected. You want to be able to see the status. Then they can tell you, no, I don't want the status to look like this. I want it to be this and that instead. Okay, if you want to do property, is this form enough to capture all the details that you want? They can say, no, this field is not necessary. That field is necessary. Can you add this detail? So you will see I can perform all of this activity, and I don't need to pass any of the validations that we have here. And just to remind you, when I say validations again, validations just means here, for example, in the name, they have said only alphabets can be typed. If I put 1, 2, 3 here, it might be able to allow me because it's not a live system, right? It's just a prototype, almost like a dummy of what it should look like. So many times in a prototype environment, we always build this prototype, especially if we work in governments that are doing very high-stake projects. They always build prototypes, and it's from there with the BAs, then begin to write our stories. So I look at this, I say, I click this button, I land on this screen, I see this and that, and then if I type, then I have to write my happy path scenario. If I typed in that this should have it there, I save, it will save. I will see this notification. This is what that notification is going to be like. All right. If I try to type the wrong thing, say where I should have number, and I try to type XYZ, then it should not accept it. There should be a validation error that, hey, you cannot type anything other than numbers in this place. When they say numbers, there might be a maximum number I can type. Say, for example, housing units can only be 20. If I try to type 1,000, the system should not accept that. But if this is a prototype, it might not restrict me from doing that, but it shows us what we can show to our stakeholders. And then we can get more requirements. Say, yeah, actually, to say, I think this should be here, something should be here, we should be able to search, we should be able to do X, Y, and Z. So this is a prototype, it's just a dummy of a system that we might want to build. Yeah, we can run this session consequently another time where we can try to build something like this together. But again, I'm just trying to demo to you a prototype. Sometimes it can be a source of elicitation with stakeholders. So, like I mentioned, it's a continuous process. We can get our requirements here, and then we try to do analysis, realize that some things are missing. I still have some questions that I need to ask you. Then we'll go back into that elicitation. And so I've gotten that clarity I needed, that I need to go into validation that, hey, is this what you really want, before we commit effort into like building this for you. Of course, we know some things make a good requirement. There are always things that like this that make a requirement. It's consistent, verifiable, singular, atomic, all of those different stuffs, characteristics that make very, very good requirements. So it matters to know that sometimes when we write requirements, we avoid using Moscow language, where we say, we try to avoid like using like Moscow language, where we try to sorry, just give me a moment. Okay, no, I'm just going to continue. Okay. Okay. I'll get back to that. Sorry, I just want to just demonstrate something that I thought I had written down somewhere. I'm just trying to talk about good or bad requirement, and I'm just trying to show just a few examples of what might be a bad example of a requirement, and then what might constitute a good example of a requirement. And so for a bad example, it could be something that is really something that is no atomic, something that is trying to talk about multiple things in a single tranche of I don't think this is the best of view, but but sometimes you can see like a requirement just talking about doing 3 things, say property assistant shall, maintain records, property records, reminders. It's talking about 3 things, all right? It is not a good requirement because it is not atomic. Atomic means you should be talking about one thing, complete in the sense that we should be able to see what it is talking about completely. Unambiguously means that there should be no private interpretation of what that requirement is talking about. So we need to rewrite this, for example, or we might be talking in terms of the system shall maintain tenant records. This is atomic. All right, the system shall maintain property records, just talking about distinct and specific things. And the system shall send reminders to tenants when their rent is due. It's talking about a single and specific thing. In this case here, the system shall be fast and user-friendly is not a good requirement, all right, because we can't test what do you mean by fast? What do you mean by user-friendly? So it matters that we write it in much clearer way. Or you shall return search result within 3 seconds for 95% of searches or 99% or all searches. You should be able to create a record within just 5 minutes or thereabouts. And then for an FR perspective, you shall allow tenants to make payments online. So again, when you want to write a requirement, just bear in mind Don't say the system must, the system should, the system could. That is you already trying to use a Moscow language. It is always strongly advised against that you should not try to write a requirement that way. Otherwise, it will look like you have prioritized it already when you have not prioritized. And again, when you speak to users, people you are trying to build your system for, just because they are using a Moscow language does not mean that you should think of what they are saying as already prioritized. Somebody might say, oh, we should be able to view, we must be able to view. Just because they have said must does not mean that from a priority lens, that what they have said has to be prioritized that way. And so we talk about, yes, we have a couple of requirements. We've got in there good requirements, and then we prioritize them. So these are a number of techniques you will always see like in product environments being used. Moscow ranking, Keno. Particularly, I have not been responsible for prioritizing requirements in my current product because we have a PO, and part of their work is to be able to define that roadmap and then determine what is the priorities of the business. Sometimes they invite you, the BA, to join them in that backlog prioritization, but many times they own it. It is part of their core work to own that. So, but you might see within that, prioritization document that you can be talking about using a Moscow ranking, can be talking about effort level, talking about rise, all of those like different techniques. I just think that matter for you to know, to be able to talk about just at a very low level. And so the must-haves is something the project cannot do without. Maybe your core MVP one you're trying to do, things that must go with it. Also be able to see if we build something. And then for this, they also talk about that too in that respect. And so we talk about documentations, all right? We could be having things like maybe a requirement document or catalog. You can also document in a user story perspective, create some data models, use cases, and then create some business process models. So those can be ways where we can depict our requirements. So if, say, for example, we have we could have, say, we could model the requirements using some of these use cases. And to be very honest with you, I have not had to create this before in any of the BA roles I've worked in, but I know how to do them. And that's because the reason you're trying to do this is also know the various use cases to bear in mind. If I were to bring up that prototype again, you will see all of these use cases are already developed in that prototype, which is something I'm going to talk about towards the very end of this. When you work in Agile, where there are probably some people they call the UCD guys, the UCDs, sometimes they work in the future. By future means that they are constantly in the forefront. They are the ones trying to get the requirement, try to model them ahead of time before then handing over to the BAs to say, hey, this is what users have said they want. We've demoed it with them. We've done the co-design with them. This model their needs and all of that. You might not need to go through all these routes of trying to create use cases. But again, just for the sake of when you want to talk to people in interviews, to say you know some of these things, but I've never had to do some of them in some of my roles before, and that's because there is a better way that gets work done for us. But this allows us to know the various ways to use a system in terms of the various use cases that we have. The point I'm trying to make here is these are some of the ways requirements can be modeled to. You can create a use case diagram. You can get a requirement from people, and then you can try to model them for them. You could also do a screen mockup, but again, once I have a prototype, I don't bother myself too much with the screen. So somebody has given you a requirement. We want to be able to see all the list of properties that we have. We want to be able to see what has been fixed, what has not been fixed. That is that requirement being shown, modeled like this for you to be able to visualize. So we are going from text into now showing a screen to see. This can also be another representation of that requirement. Again, the point here is once we have requirement in text, there are then various ways that we can go ahead to further model them. I think I had something around data diagram somewhere, but not probably on the screen. But again, the point here is there are various ways requirements are modeled. Model in very simple BA word just means diagrams, something we can see, something we can better be able to relate to. And so in terms of documentation, depending on what kind of environment, also determine what tools you use. Like I said, there's a lot of work that people do with Miro in some of our companies in terms of requirement elicitation. You get some requirements, drop them, dump them in that Miro board. You can attach different documents to visualize what you've got in. Your analysis work can be modeled here on this Miro. You can do some high-level service blueprints. You can do some flowcharts just to like model some flows or journeys of some of the users that you are dealing with. Okay, we could also be uploading them on SharePoint. Say you have your requirements in a Word document, and then you can upload them in the SharePoint. But for me and my current, some of the works I do at the moment, they are always on Jira. So you translate them into user stories, and then you keep them on Jira's tickets. Sometimes we also store some stuff on Confluence. And for people who might be wondering what is Confluence, just imagine Confluence as just like a mini blog where people dump like text, just write text and just try to publish them for everyone to have access to see. People also keep requirements in Excel sheets. Again, if you are trying to just get those requirements up front as like in a maybe BRD format, this can be a way to model that. But mostly in agile environments, these are like some of the tools that are much more common for requirements documentation. And so how do we know that we are built the right thing with respect to requirements? In BCS, there are two types of what they call traceability. There's what they call forward traceability and then backward traceability. It just means we are looking at a feature we've built and then try to see, oh, have we really implemented that requirement? Or we are looking at a requirement and try to see what feature is going to allow us to make this. Again, just want to shoot myself in the leg. I have not had to say in very simple word, this is the requirement we got. This is also we have implemented it, like as trying to do traceability in that sense. But what we usually do is like what we call like a UAT. So they've said they want something, we've built it, we demoed it to them, they use it, say yes, that's met our needs, or no, this problem I was trying to really solve for you guys have not solved it. But it's not like we carry this diagram. Let's look at this together. Are we tracing backwards or forward? No, we just take the functionality we have built to them and then say this is pass or this is not a pass for them. But it's possible in some environments, especially when they get to make you the BA to produce some of these test documents, that you might have something like this. Again, this is like an RTM. It could also be used to trace your requirements. So you look at the functionality, and then you can always say yes, it's been passed, or no, it has not been passed. And I want to quickly show something here. So part of the thing, depending on what kind of environment you work, right? Part of the thing that also make your requirement management to be complete is what we call testing. Okay. Testing has to be complete for us to say that yes, we have met my requirements. Let's say, for example, this is you are trying to like buy a car, okay, and then you want to like test these functionalities. Can I do here? Can I do? Okay, give me one moment, please. Some moments, almost there. So I just didn't know when. I'm just trying to do something. I'm just trying to avoid. You know, I was just trying to show out to him, but I don't think this call is allowing me to do what I want to do. I'll just carry on with the conversation. My apologies. I'll continue sharing my screen back, and then maybe we can try to wind down the conversation that we are having. But essentially, the point I'm just trying to say is part of the things that complete our requirements is just that testing, right? So you can have an RTM where you have the requirements we got that from, and then what you're trying to test on that, like the pass or fail, and then that just completes the overall life cycle for you. I'll go to the last part of this conversation, which is my experience working in Agile. If you work in Agile and then you work, say, in government, it's not uncommon for you to be doing this thing they call like almost like the double diamond. If there is a major piece of work coming, there's first of all, there will be time where the team needs to do a discovery. Discovery just means we are trying to understand this problem that we're trying to solve for, okay? Then from that part, they then begin to like niche down solutions that this is what we need to like do precisely before we then go into like this building mode. So in many of these environments, sometimes the UCDs are the guys that like stay in this forefront of trying to understand that problem. Yes, the BAs make contributions here and they will support them. Again, depending on where you work and the ways of working that has been established in the organization, okay? You support them in many of these analyses and all that. But most of the bulk lifting that happens here, sometimes like the UCD that do it. Sometimes we stay here with the dev. Sometimes the dev to also do some bit of discovery to maybe they are trying to do a spike, just trying to understand the problem from a technical perspective or trying to shape some of the solutions that are being brought forward here. So the BAs might also do analysis here to support some of the discovery work that's going on in this space. But many times you might sit here from a BA perspective, just really trying to, yes, this is what we need to build. And then you start creating your tickets and all of those things that needs to happen. Sometimes you also work here too. But again, it depends on what phase of the project that you are joining. So in some of my experiences, I work with UCD. UCD means user-centered designers. These are some of them. You can hear people they call the URL guys, the user researchers. There are people they call interaction designers, service content designers, service designers, digital accessibility guys, all of those stuffs. These are some of the roles you'll find in UCD. And their work, they vary. This URL, for example, they do extensive research with users. They can be trying to do content testing, URLs, trying to understand problems. Can you show me your screen? How do you understand this problem? What are you doing? And then they will take a lot of notes on Miro. And then they will now go and do analysis. That analysis, these guys, called the designers, can then take that to create the journey. They create what they call like a blueprint, a service blueprint. From these blueprints, these ones, the interaction designers can then begin to create like screens and prototypes out of that before that is then handed to like say the BAs. Of course, with the BAs, we support in shaping some of these. If there are rules that need to be implemented, if there are like validations that need to like be put into place, if there are like some technical work that needs to happen, or you are looking at something they are designing and you call like your architect, a guy, do you think this thing is going to work this way? And they are telling you, no, that's going to be a problem for us at the back end. Then you have to like introduce new designs for them. You have to explore new options. But they usually take the lead in designing some of these things while you support them by just validating some of the works you do, trying to look at negative scenarios, things that can crash the system, and providing sort of like insight for them. And so they understand the needs of the users. They try to model processes and scenarios. They think about a number of processes and scenarios. They create prototypes for you, and then they design and validate with users. In one of the roles I've worked in, they had to create this thing they call the double diamond, where they show how the work of the bees intersect with these guys. And then you see some intersections here within this diamond where some of the things we do also intersect with one of the things that they do. But they are clear about their work. Sometimes some of their work interlap with our own as BAs, but just to be able to see areas to collaborate. Like I said, in some of my experiences, I've majorly been in this developed space where you just like review their prototypes and the rules that are there, and then supporting some of the code designs while also making contributions to these other parts that happen in the diamond. So from your role, you have the requirement from them, you have the screens, and then just support it by just doing your 3 Amingo with your dev guys. Once you're writing your stories, you do estimation, planning poker, and then you write your work, you do like a BA review them, and that gets the work done. So in terms of the approaches, in terms of how the requirement work start for us in some of the 2 experiences I've had. So like I said, the UR guys, they are in the future. They stay ahead of the team just to ensure that there is enough work we can pick up from. They do the analysis, they map their journeys on Miro, they create an HTML prototype, just mirroring the stuff, then they hand it over to the PAs, then we create tickets out of it. The other part is, say, where the PO or the user come directly to you, the BA or the PO, and then you look at the functionality, you decide the PO accepts it like a backlog. You look at this thing like, I don't think there's a UCD involvement that needs to happen with these. And so you just go straight into creating tickets on Jira, and that's like takes that was off. If you were to imagine this is a screen that we have in our company, say for example, this is a product that has been designed for them. Say this is what they currently have, and then they're saying, hey, actually, I can't access this screen on a mobile. This is not something you pick as a BA and you start writing stories for, because you don't know what that journey is like. The UCD have to model that journey for you, screen by screen, and then you then take it afterwards. They have to do their UCD work. If let's say, for example, they're saying that they want to search globally, that is the search to search every single thing in this. We don't know what will happen if I click on this search. What screen am I going to see? If I click on this search, what should be the screen I'll see? How should it be laid out? In what order? In what sequence? The UCD guys, they have to create that screen for you, set by set, for you to understand what is inside that place. And then before you are sure that, yes, I have the right screen, I have the right understanding of what needs to be done, I can then go ahead to start like creating the screen that is needed for this piece of work. The point I'm trying to make is UCD have to model, and they have to model the screen for you, screen by screen. When I say screen, just for somebody who is wondering, what do you mean by screen tossing? So let's say, let me try to get us to be on the same page, so that these things they are not very hard, but they are just very big vocabularies and grammar that people sometimes they talk about. Let's say, for example, I type HMRC. Or maybe I say claim IHS form, for example. And let's say I click on this, I land on this screen. So this thing here, for example, is a screen. I click on that button, I land on this screen, right? So this is a screen, but that is what they mean by screen, okay? If I click on no and I say continue, for example, this is a screen that I also like land on, all right? Let's say I click yes and I click on this continue, that is a screen, all right? Let's say I land, I click here and I don't click on anything, wait, oops. Let's say I click here. When I click this, whatever I land on is called a screen, all right? So I click this is a screen, I click on this is a screen, and all of those like different things. So that thing I have just shown now, they are called screens, okay? So sometimes in a product environment, so somebody needs to model that for you to see what is like going to happen on a screen by screen. So you said we need to do a global search. So if I click that, what am I going to see? Okay. So if I click on this search, what is the screen I'm going to see? They usually have to model it for you, set by set, for you to know that you are written a good user story and your acceptance criteria are really very, very clear. So you want to have an export option here. So somewhere here, you should be able to say, I want to export it. I don't know what, if I click the export button, what's going to come up? If I click on that thing, what's going to happen next? That is how you will know that you are writing a good story that has, encompassed all of your various acceptance criteria. These are examples of things that need a UCD involvement. But if you work in a company where there are no UCD, then you might need to, they are the same guys that call the UX, but in government parastatals, you hear them being referred to like UCD. So UCD encompasses all of these various guys I have mentioned to you. Yeah. The URs, the the URs, the designers, these are like product designers or the UX UI guys. Then the content are the ones that write the wordings. Yeah, so these are examples. And there might also be some ones that don't require much maybe much UCD. Say for example, there should just be a button and if you click it, you should be able to arrange things in order of priority. Just click, this is what will happen. We can visualize this one, so I might not need much UCD. So this one should change from 25 to 50. So just say, given I'm on this page, then when I look at this, I should see them arranging a batches of 10, 15, and 100. That doesn't involve like much UCD, right? So page sizing, if I click on these, this will happen. Those are really basic stuff that might not require much UCD involvement. These are also some other ones just talking exactly about the same thing. So we want to be able to export PDF, then we need a UCD involvement. So we want to be able to like do a quick search. There is no search barrier at the moment, but we need a UCD input and all of that. And that brings me to the end of my shortest possible ever session that I imagine it was going to be. I don't know if there are questions, contribution from anyone, anybody wants to challenge anything or add a much interesting context to anything that we've discussed.
Thank you for watching this video. Please remember to like and subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming webinars.